Welcome to today's workshop, Saturday, 26th of October 2024. The theme today is going to be house style and editing, how to use house style to improve, polish the manuscript, what every author should know about preparing the manuscript using a house style. Wanda has prepared a presentation today for this purpose, and without delay, I'm passing this to Wanda. Wanda, off you go.
Thank you, Paul. So yeah, when Paul asked me to do house style and editing, I thought, okay, so I've been on a bit of a journey here. First book, probably had over 10 meetings with Paul. In the beginning, I didn't really understand what he was getting at. And then I got better and better over time. And I started making a list of things that I kept forgetting. Certain things just weren't intuitive. So this is my list of things I want to incorporate into the book, and maybe that list will be useful for you as well. Obviously, Paul shares quite a bit of information in terms of house style editing. There's Word documents, some of them are like 10 pages long, and so what I've done is I've taken the bits out that are relevant to my book, and I'll show you what I've done. So house style, basically these are the, I don't know, 10 things or so that I want to make sure I don't forget. And I've kind of written down the items that are relevant to my situation. You may have a different choice, but this has helped me to stay on track and to almost like have a cheat sheet when I've forgotten what I'm supposed to be doing. So capitals and italics. So I've decided, to use capitals for proper nouns, and I use italics when I mention books. I'm writing a book about coaching, about a coaching methodology. I tell people where I get my stuff from, maybe other people's books. So whenever I mention those books, they've become the italics. I actually quite like writing in Arial on my computer, but when a chapter is ready, I then convert it into the final style. And the final style is actually Times New Roman. And I use size 12, line space 1.5, left justification, double space between paragraphs. Some books, have a different layout. I've decided that this is my kind of preferred look. And whenever possible, I use what is called active voice for my grammar. This has taken me forever to learn, and I still have to double check whether I'm in active or passive. It's not something that comes easy to me to kind of figure it out. So it's almost like I need my cheat sheet. So active, it basically is about the person first. So the person's name goes first and then what they're doing. Passive is whatever they're doing that you write first, and then it's done by the person. I think my first copies are all in passive. That was my style. And then I realized it was very boring. So now I've learned to be better at storytelling, and I've become more active. I'm writing a non-fiction book. So I think that was the other lesson that I had, that when you're in non-fiction, you can add storytelling. And I'm doing my storytelling sessions with Jacques to kind of become better at that. And the first versions are very different to the latter versions of my chapter. And then headings and subheadings. So again, it was all a muddle. It was like, what size are we using? How are we doing the numbering? How do we do a full stop or not? Now I've kind of got a system going, and now I know there's no full stop after the title, and I'm using bold for 14. Again, personal choice, you may want to do something else. But having this in my list kind of makes it very easy. I don't need to, you know, search for the answer. It's kind of, oh no, here's my cheat sheet. Same with numbers. This has become easier. Numbers and spelling is kind of almost like a natural way for me to write now. I'd spell the words out rather than doing 1-4 for 14. I write 14 as a word. Obviously, being in the UK, or my audience is likely to be British, so I've started my first version in British, not American. And then the tone of voice.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes. Of course, Simon.
I'm also writing, thank you, also writing non-fiction. But what would you do with 1,250,375?
I would say
allow
I'll
digits
spell those
then, or
out
not?
in the numbers because the words will be like half a sentence otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I just
Wanda is
wonder at
right.
what point you cross over to digits.
There's
Yeah.
a Wanda, do you want to go ahead?
I don't have big numbers in my book, so it's not hasn't come up. We have actually
That's a good answer.
Yeah, the rule
in a
is
recent edit, I actually used 50th birthday. I crossed it out and made it milestone birthday.
yeah, so that says it could be
So we
because it could be
swapped
50.
out the numbers to make it another word to make it easier.
Simon, what happens with the numbers is the rule of thumb. It's about consistency. We're writing letters, digits from 0 to 10, and then from 11 and up, we use numbers. When it comes to 100,000, 10,000, then we do with the comma, 10, comma, 0, 0, 0. And so 1 million, with 1 million, you can write 1 million because it's very, very short, but that's what we do. It's about consistency. Some publishers use letters from 0 to 99, and then from 100 and up, they use digits. I think it's easier to do that. To do the first one, 0 to 10 letters, and then you can use numbers. But I'm with Wanda when it comes to 14 years. Yeah, you write it 14, it doesn't matter. But particularly he's 50 years old, he's 60 years old, he's 20 years old, or she's 20 years old. Then so long as you are consistent throughout the entire draft, use one or the other, digits or letters, you'll be fine.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think this is very much what did I agree to do type list, and then to stick with whatever the standard is that I set for myself. I don't think the standard itself has to be the way that I've put it here. That's just my personal choice. But it's more, what did I say I was going to do kind of list.
Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
And then the tone and voice, funny enough, I did some editing this morning on a chapter that I'd written and then copied it into ChatGPT and said, please use a friendly and authoritative tone. And it came back actually rewritten in something that I quite liked. So again, by choosing that combination of friendly and authoritative, it's kind of allowed me to check it to see whether that is actually happening in things like AI. Oh, let's have a look. How do I go to the next one? So all of this, I can kind of remember. The next page, this is my final page on my house style. I can never remember this. And this definitely is almost like I need to print this out. So I've had a bit of a journey when it comes to or putting down clear dialogue. Because it was very much a textbook type at the beginning, and then I've started adding stories, I've kind of learned how to write dialogue. And where the curly quotation marks go, somehow I'm in a habit of doing it wrong. I put commas after the curly quotations. So instead of putting it within the curly quotations, I have the habit of putting in quotation marks what the person had said, then a comma, and then finishing the sentence with things like, I shouted, or I said, or whatever. And now I realize that's wrong. Well, to make it consistent, I've chosen to do the comma within the curly quotation marks. And that's something I've kind of learned since meeting Paul, that is how it's done. It's an option of how it's done. The same with when you use a question mark or an exclamation mark after a sentence, you don't need a comma. So it's like, how do you feel about that? Question mark, curly quotations, and then no comma, and then I asked. And it's a bit like learning English to me. I've written it down so I can double check that I'm doing it right. And obviously the third example is you use a full stop if you want to have a bit of a space and you don't read the sentence very quickly. There is a bit of a natural pause in the sentence before it continues. So the full stop allows the reader to kind of take the information in. And obviously if I read it aloud, it is also a signal that I've got to pause and then read on. And then thoughts, you can have quotation marks, or not have quotation marks. But I've now decided not to have them and just write them out. And in fact, I've realized those quotation marks should be the other way out. But anyway, so yeah, and it's now I need to go back through the whole manuscript to make sure that whenever I've got dialogue, that this is correct. Because somebody or the tools like Grammarly don't actually pick it up. It's not. It's an option of how to do it, and it's not. The computer doesn't tell me that I've made a mistake if I put the comma on the other side of the quotation marks. So yeah, this has been a bit of a journey. Don't know whether other people have had this struggle of writing down dialogue.
I think, yeah, we've gone through back and forth with this, with Jenny, with Darren. We discussed those, particularly when we do read out loud editing. Yeah, so we have, nothing distracts the eye more than finding parts that are very different, visually very, very different, and presenting, for example, the titles, book titles, or the film title in italics in one page, but they're not in italics in another page. So it does distract the eye quite a lot. It's about consistency.
Yeah. So that's my cheat sheet. And then when we look at editing, I suppose, again, I have now developed my own editing skills so that the calls that I've had with Paul, I can now do by myself, and I'm picking up an awful lot without having to jump on a call. And I think that's something that's kind of come with experience, I suppose. And the first thing I do is always have a think about what do I want the reader to walk away with, or how do I want them to feel after reading this chapter? And if I can articulate that, I then put it at the bottom of the chapter in a different color, so it's not part of the text, so that I can kind of go back afterwards to say, did I achieve my initial thoughts? Is this chapter doing what it's supposed to be doing? When I first started having calls with Paul, he would also give me hints and tips of how I could do it better. I don't know, this is an example of my first attempt to describe a discussion I had with a client called Haley, and I was very robotic. I didn't really go into Haley's emotions. And he's like, no. Tell me what Haley is feeling. What's her pain? What's going on there? And I found that quite hard to do initially. I was like, oh, I don't know. And then when you think about it, of course, you can capture that. And then the second thing I look at is the start, middle, and end. We've done these exercises where you listen to the music and you listen to the start, middle, and end. What's happening in the chapter? What's the start, middle, and end? And then when there's a markup of the text, there's a couple of rules around, what the markups mean. So yellow might be, yeah, these are the themes for your book, or these are some of the house style bits, so that it's consistent. Blue text is where Paul might have made the text better, or he's suggesting for me to consider changes. And then the crossouts, there was a whole session on this as well, is anything that you can leave out and the sentence basically keeps the same meaning. It is easy to say something that doesn't need to be there. So that's superfluous words and concepts. Take it out. Sometimes somebody else needs to tell you that word is not needed. And then you're like, yeah, that makes total sense. It's like, let's take it out. So this is the way that I now look at my own editing. Is there anything in there that can come out? And that was it, really. That's the end of my thoughts around house style. I'll stop sharing. House style and editing.
Thank you. Any questions for Wanda? Or regarding the house style?
One thing that still confuses me is the quotations in just a normal sentence, not dialogue. But there's some things in quotes at the end. Does the period go in the quotes, or outside the quotes when it's not dialogue?
Those are mainly used to emphasize something. And for parts of quotes, you take something from another, someone said or someone wrote something, and you use a part of it. To make it stand out, you use single quotation marks. And then you can use italics to stand out. Italics are very powerful, so use them sparingly, and yeah, they become extremely useful. But when it comes to a quote within a quote, then what we do is we use double quotation marks, and then let's say Wanda has had a discussion with a lady, and Haley says, "Okay, I was at work, I was talking to my manager, and my manager said." So that's a quote within quotes. So we use single quotation marks for quotes within quotes, and we use single quotation marks in the text to specify that particular word, phrase, or
So for something that you would, when you're talking and someone's using air quotes, say it's not really for emphasis, it's for like, this is the word people use, so I'm going to tell you, but I have to put quotes around it because it's not my word, it's like society's word. Do you put the period inside it or outside of it?
Okay, if it's a full quote, inside. If it's a part quote, outside.
It's just a word. Maybe it's a word.
If it's a word, then I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't even use a quote because it's separated already. A punctuation. By using single quotation marks, for that particular word.
Single quotes, and then inside and the last quote would be inside the period.
If it's finished, it's at the end of the sentence, you use that, then well, what will happen is the punctuation should be outside this single quotation marks. I mean, you can use brackets. It's the same principle. With brackets, you always use punctuation outside outside.
You could also use italics, right?
Yeah, they're very powerful. With italics is, yeah, go Simon.
I was going to say, the example that you say, and some people call this woke, right? You would put the period after the quotation because the only thing in quotes is woke and the whole sentence is...
Yeah.
Is that, I think, was the question. That's what I got.
Yes.
That was my question from what Jenny asked. It may have been the same.
Thank you. And so that would be in single quote as well?
Yes, but there's something about exclamation mark, question mark, or the three dots. If what you're using as a part quote is a word where we say hurrah, and then you do need an exclamation mark, you put that within the single quotation marks, and then whatever punctuation after that, if it's the end of the sentence, then you use. Yeah, so it's very similar when it comes to the double quotation marks, but it's because it's shorter, it tends not to have punctuation. Anytime you want to emphasize something within a sentence, consider first single quotation marks. If you want to emphasize it even more, consider italics. And for example, if you want to emphasize the last three words in a sentence, you don't have to do all three in italics. Do the first of the three, and then by default, it's going to emphasize the other two. You can do three, but that's another trick you can use when it comes to using italics. They're very powerful. Many people misuse them. You overuse them all the time. Use them sparingly, and you'll do a fine job.
Can I ask a similar question, but about quotations, which is, if you're doing dialogue, John is speaking with Mary, then John has one line and then Mary has another line, and you keep separating them. But if in a sentence you want to include something, I asked this question a lot, and a lot of people replied, "That's not me." Would I put the "that's not me" in quotations in the sentence?
Yes, yes, if it's quote from that person, if that person said it in any way or form, out loud, basically murmured, screamed, yeah.
Okay, and that is double quotes because it's spoken, or
every time when it comes to a dialogue, things that the person says, murmurs, screams, said, exclaimed, we use double quotation marks. Yeah, we do double quotation, and the punctuation, I'm repeating the same what Wanda said. We should sit within the double quotation marks at the end of the sentence. Within.
Yep, thank you.
It's about consistency, so it becomes easier for the reader, for the eye and the brain to know who said what.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for some reason, I was in the habit of putting my comma after the quotation marks.
But you don't think about these things to start with. Even when you read a book, they're there, but you don't need to notice, and that's the reason why they're there. But when you start to write, then they become more and more important. first you draft, you tell your story. That's what matters. But then the closer we get to finalizing the chapter, and for that matter, the book, the more important these visual elements becomes. They are absolutely essential, because nothing makes the reader more unsettle the reader more than seeing these elements that are not being consistent at all. It means we didn't take due care to really make it smoother for the reader. And you get used to it. Once you understand the principle, you get used to it. It becomes easy to spot. And that's what we're going to be doing today. When we start to read out loud, aside the draft, the story, so we'll tackle those elements as well.
Quite funny, because I love my books, obviously, and most of them are about coaching or non-fiction anyway. And I've picked up about 6 books, and they're full of mistakes. I now see that. I never spotted it before. Now that I've got these rules, I've realized, and they've been published by big publishing houses, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, very often it's the typesetting, basically.
Yeah, it's the words aren't the mistakes, but one of the books, the first half, the page number is in the bottom of the page in the middle, and then it swaps to top right-hand corner of the page. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I never looked for that stuff. It wasn't important, this book is still interesting. But now I'm like, oh, I wonder why they didn't correct.
yeah,
Why don't they have everything the same?
exactly. There you go. And actually, when it comes to the print book, it's important for the page number to be at the bottom center, because when you tend to read it, the thumb tends to go on that part, and it doesn't matter if you cover it, but at least there's a bit of a space, so it doesn't cover the text, and it makes it easier. Otherwise, there's a lot. If you put it on the top, there's a lot of it clashing for attention, such as the title of the book and the title of the chapter. If you put the page number as well on the top, well, that's for the typesetter to do. But it's good. It's really good to be aware of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wanda. That's James Bateman book. It's a proof copy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a
I
proof
did
copy.
ask him to let us know when he has a launch party, because obviously I want to go
Yeah,
to it.
absolutely. And just try to go to it. Any other questions? But then let's start to do read out loud editing and deal with these elements as they happen in the text. Who would like to start? Wanda, you can start if you have something.
Well, I always have something, so let the others go first.
Okay, who would well? So what we'll do is, Awida, are you going to have something?
I can.
Okay, Megan.
I can, but I don't, I mean, I can always come up.
Yeah, absolutely will. So, okay, Simon, do you have something?
I don't have anything, no.
Okay, Jenny.
I don't have anything today either.
Okay, fair enough. So we've got Egan, Wida, and Wanda. Who wants to go first?
Well, I have something that I open. I can just go.
Go for it. So, because let's say what we're talking about, we've got 3. Let's go for yeah. So let's do a 20-minute slot for each. So let's do more or less around 10 minutes of read out loud, and then we can go back and forth with the discussion. Okay. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, let me get the timer ready, and Okay. Fair enough. When you're ready.
Okay. All right, so this is a chapter called Coco. His skin gleamed like a supermoon, radiant and otherworldly. Jamie was the first boy who ever twisted my heart into something both painful and exhilarating, my first true crush. It wasn't just a passing infatuation. It was the kind of obsession that consumes a young girl, trapping her thoughts in an endless loop of longing. He became an intoxicating spell I couldn't shake. It was only 2 years after Mama had told us Daddy was dead. I was still mourning, still yearning for something I'd never fully had. Daddy was never the doting, present father I longed for, so I craved attention from boys, any attention, whether it was nurturing or destructive, as long as it was from a male. That need, that unfulfilled space, made Jamie's quiet, almost indifferent nature more magnetic to me. My father had been emotionally absent, a figure in the background of my life, distant, detached. So it made sense that Jamie's aloofness was oddly comforting. He seemed unreachable, and that only deepened my fascination. His shy smile was a gravitational force, pulling me in like a celestial body forming in the emptiness of space. My teenage mind wove fantasies, assigning him a significance he could never have known. This wasn't my first foray into magical thinking, but it was one of the earliest signs of my tendencies to imagine people as larger than life, needing me in ways they never truly did. I often found myself drawn to the broken, the needy, the ones I could fix. It was a pattern I hadn't yet recognized in myself. The more damaged someone seemed, the more heroic I felt in their presence, as if my purpose was to rescue them from themselves. It started with Jamie, but extended to my own sister, Claudette, whom I placed on an untouchable pedestal, a golden throne in my mind's castle, unreachable yet worshipped. Every time I saw Jamie, my thoughts scrambled, collided, and reshaped into something I couldn't explain. It was like watching planets form, gas and dust swirling around a star, slowly creating something new through an invisible, irresistible pull. That's how it felt being a teenager trapped in lust. Either I was being drawn into his world, or I was pulling him into mine. Either way, I knew we were on a collision course. Mama, Sandra, Neil, and I lived in a second-floor apartment, perfectly situated for my people-watching habit. The front steps of our building were in clear view of my bedroom window, and I'd watch the comings and goings of everyone like a director behind a camera, crafting a film in my mind. Jamie's movements became my favorite scene to watch. I learned his patterns, could predict his exits and returns like clockwork, and it made me feel as if we were bound by fate. I became his shadow without ever speaking a word to him, feeding my imagination with each glimpse of his fleeting presence. Jamie floated through the east end of the Marlborough housing project like a figure from another world, always in that black and white kung fu outfit, his panda suit. He seemed to glide between the drab buildings like a monk on a spiritual journey. In my mind, he became a Shaolin warrior, a hero navigating the wasteland of one of many New York City public housing projects. There was something transcendent in the way he moved, something that defied the hopelessness of our surroundings. Without even trying, he channeled the spirit of Bruce Lee, his hero. His quiet, mysterious demeanor was intoxicating to me. Detached, aloof, that was the language I spoke fluently. Did I want someone stable with a solid family background and a clear sense of direction? No, that wasn't my story. I was always drawn to the broken, the lost, those who needed fixing. That sounds repetitive, so I guess we'll talk about it in the editing section. Jamie was perfect in his imperfection, a reflection of my own fractured sense of self. Like many boys from our neighborhood, Jamie was trapped in the cycle of poverty and hopelessness. He lived with his mother, Olive, who often found herself lost in the bottle. Vodka was her elixir of choice. She barely managed to keep herself and her son afloat with welfare checks and food stamps. When Jamie spent the red money on Adidas sneakers, it wasn't just about fitting in, it was about survival. About feeling seen in a world that often overlooked Black boys like him, mixed race or not. I too wore my circumstances on my body. Tight clothes that were either hand-me-downs or simply the best fit mama could afford on a meager $50 a month child support, which I would later learn about. We were both trying to navigate a life that felt too small for us, each in our own way, and I'll stop there.
Do you want to carry on for another couple of minutes?
Sure.
You've got
Okay.
3 minutes left. Yeah, go for it.
All right. At 12, I knew nothing about my body. Mama was terrified of me getting pregnant, her fear of my blossoming womanhood overshadowing any real conversation about it. I remember the day she confronted me about menstruating. "You know what can happen, right?" she asked, her voice dripping with fear and disappointment. I fumbled through a half-asked question, already knowing the answer. "I can get pregnant?" "Yes, that's right. So don't do anything stupid." Her words hung heavily around my neck like an albatross, but they didn't prepare me for what would come. By 18, I had already stumbled through life unaware of my own body signals. I was 6 months pregnant before I realized it. My cycles had always been irregular, and the spotting had seemed normal until it wasn't. I finally told my sister that something was off, and she took me to the OBGYN. We waited in Dr. Hewitt's office, my heart racing, not knowing that my life was about to change forever. "So, Wida, did I say that correctly?" he said in his Trinidadian lilt. "Yes, my name is Wida. Unusual name. I see from your form that you'll be 19 years old this year, yes? Are you in school, Wida?" "Not at this time. I attended a semester of college a few years ago." "Oh, I see. Who is this with you? Is this a family or friend?" "This is my sister, Sandra. She is the one who scheduled my appointment." "Sandra, nice to meet you."
1 minute left.
"Okay. You look like my people. Any Indian in your family?" "No, my father's originally from Hong Kong, and our mother is Black," Sandra replied. "Well, it's a pleasure meeting you ladies today. Now back to you, Wida. So what brings you here today?" I think I'm pregnant." "You think you're pregnant?" The truth is, when I told him that I thought I was pregnant, he was extremely dubious and said the quiet part out loud. "Pregnant where?" He laughed incredulously. "Okay, if you are, you must not be too far along. Sure enough, after doing a physical, I think, let me just read this last paragraph.
Yeah, go for it.
Sure enough, after doing a physical exam, he announced I was 6 months pregnant. If I had a camera, I would take a picture of the priceless shock on Dr. Hewitt's face. I was carrying the baby in my back, and the baby was playing hide and seek. That's it.
It's interesting, actually. Thank you. In the last paragraph you read, you said the priceless shock in his face, but what it read was the priceless look of shock, and that's a matter of, it came naturally to you, and that's unconscious repetition. It's a priceless shock. It's a look in his face, in someone's face, rather than look. It's interesting, actually. Yeah. And it was good you carried on for a bit longer, because there was a part with a lot of dialogue as well, so we can. Who wants to go first?
I will.
Go for it.
I really love this. It really pulled me in. I could relate to a lot of it, as you can imagine, but the words you use, your language, the way you write, it's beautiful and deep. Some of the notes I have, some of them are pretty minor. There's a word unreachable. I don't know where to find it in there, but has a comma after it, and I don't think you need the comma.
Unreachable. Let me just.
Mm-hmm.
Unreachable. Let's see. This is one of two. Where is it? All right.
It's the next one.
Okay. So let's find. All right, next. Okay.
That one.
Okay.
And then there's a sentence that says in their presence, and then as if my purpose, and you do have a comma in between, or no, you don't have anything in between. I feel like there needs to be more of a pause. You read it with a pause, but when I read it with my eyes, there was no pause. So if there's a way to pause it after the presence, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a dash or.
Let me try the dash.
Okay.
Let me highlight this in yellow. Okay.
And then you did mention while you're reading it that there was a repetitive sentence. I would take that whole sentence out. It's the one that says fixing in it.
Let's find it. Okay.
And then when you talked about his Adidas sneakers, I think you don't need the word sneakers.
So let me put an next to this. One text. And Adidas sneakers. So it's around here somewhere.
I think it's right there on the right, at the bottom paragraph, halfway through. On the very right edge of the paragraph. Yep, the sneakers.
All right.
There's a section where you're talking about your mom having $50 a month. And then you said, which I would learn about later, more about. I don't think you need that part about learning about it later. I think we'll learn about it later with you. And then if we move down to the dialogue with the doctor. He says you have an unusual name, the punctuation around that. It's odd to have two quotes right next to each other. And so I'd either take out the quotes or put in the middle, he said, or something to slow it down.
I like that.
So then we'd have a comma right after unusual name. And then maybe a full stop after said, yeah. And then you can put the quotes back in front of the I.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that reads better. And then you have a dialogue in there in the middle before you talk about being pregnant. I don't know that you need any of that here. It just feels out of, I know that's what happened, but in the story, it feels out of place to me, but you can get other people's opinions.
Mhm. So are you saying none of the dialogue is necessary?
Not that middle stuff, like from the school to your father being from Hong Kong. All that stuff feels extraneous, like it might be mentioned somewhere else in the book, but
Mhm.
here it feels out of place to me.
Okay.
But other people may disagree. That's all I have. I really, really liked it.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, from you, that's high praise.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So I'll go back to the beginning to see if anyone else has. You're muted, Pauline. You're muted. Mhm.
Oh, I am, silly me. I am. I was. It's pretty good, Wida, because remember, I think we did go through this some time ago.
Maybe.
We've done quite a good job. Going back to the punctuation, to quotation marks, when you have the dialogue with your mother, where your mother tells you not to get pregnant, you're using single quotation marks around for the dialogue. And some of those dialogues are sitting on in the same paragraph. It's got to be different paragraphs, who's different person saying something, and then the other person responding. And I'm with Jenny when it comes to the quotation marks, the double quotation marks. In more dialogue you use, we don't use more than 2 quotation marks in a dialogue if it's not interrupted. As an author, that's your secret weapon. You can always split the dialogue. The author, you jump in and say, oh wow, I said, he said, oh, what are you talking about?
Mhm.
I stood, or he stood, or she stood, and thought, and then the dialogue. Then of course you need. So, and you're using British English.
I can't help myself because that's how I was raised initially, but then I had to unlearn it in America. So I think by default, my brain is going back to how I was raised.
I believe so. And it's interesting to see that you're using the dash, the American dash, the very long one.
Mhm.
Interesting. Hmm. Yeah,
That's
where
what
you see.
happened. Yeah.
Although that's in your sample of house style, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the British English, because I struggle with that one because it's not one I normally use. I think we did what Paul was related to was later on towards the end of what we were talking about, which might come out anyway, given what Jenny was saying. But if you go back up just one page, there, if you see there, like for example, that third line that struck out, oh, I see, who's this with you? Is this family or friend? There's repetitive quotation marks that just, and I appreciate you've done it because it's a full stop, but
Mhm.
I don't think those are necessary. You only need, to me, that looks quite odd.
Mhm.
Yeah, Simon, thank you. But that's what it does with other elements as well. It is not right. It doesn't feel right
Mhm.
because there are 2 different dialogues. Then they become 2 different dialogues, and with nothing in between. Okay, we've got 40 seconds left.
Okay, can I just one more because I'm curious about this, having never been pregnant myself. When you read it,
Are you sure, Simon?
I could be carrying in the back. When I read it, when you read it, you said something was off, but the word is something felt off.
Mm.
So therefore I wondered whether that was naturally you preferred was, but what I was asking is off the right word?
Mm,
Different,
I
I
mean-
guess. Or maybe off means different, but it's more a question for the ladies. But
a good question.
Didn't feel right, you mean,
I
Simon?
don't think something was off. I don't know. That seems sort of that worked when you read it.
Mm,
It's just whether you would feel off. I mean, you could feel off. I don't know. I thought you might felt it be felt different or was off.
Easy.
It just
You
struck
could
me
maybe,
when you read it.
Vida, you could maybe go into more of how you were actually feeling, like what that off feeling felt like.
mhm.
Maybe. I got the something felt off, but it could be deeper.
Mhm.
If it was deeper, it might have just been an intuitive feeling. As a woman, we get those, right?
Yeah.
And you don't really understand what's off. You just know something's off,
Yeah,
right?
true. So it tells me that Simon was really paying attention if he can remember that.
I know. I was really enjoying it. I was wondering we had to
Yeah.
stop.
I could picture your mother telling you, don't get pregnant. And actually, there was a part you were talking about, and it was the bottle, and then vodka. You said was, if you have a full stop at the end of bottle, and then vodka was because it was a sentence with a dash, that would make it would make it even more. It will increase that effect just by because it's pause. That's what the full stop is.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Great,
okay.
thank you,
Thank you.
thank you, Wida. Who would like to go next? Megan, would you like to go next?
Sure.
Maybe-
Now
maybe-
I'm nervous. I think mine's a bit more rough, but let's go for it.
That's okay.
So this was like a chapter that's since been written to fill in some. I should be able to share. All right. Every chapter in my book starts with a quote and ends with a journal prompt, or two. So, yeah. Residues of rage. Anger is a forward-looking emotion rooted in the idea that there should be change. Resentment, on the other hand, is locked in the past and usually generates no meaningful difference in the situation. Sorry. I know what you must be thinking. What the fuck, Megan? Oh, I was angry, believe me. But I was also very sad, confused, alone, and yet on some level deep down, which I was well aware ran countercurrent to North American status quo's operating manual on what to do when someone cheats on you. I wanted to stay and figure out what happened to see if our vision was still possible. They say, like family therapists say, or other people who have gone through this, that it takes twice the length of time the person was cheating to build back that trust. I'd mostly agree with that approximation, but add, and it changes you, the relationship, and likely how you define trust forever. So in that, processing infidelity is a lot like processing grief, and that you are mourning the dream, the perfect relationship you thought you had, the uncomplicated sense of trust, the idea that this person is the one, and so much more. To be clear, before I had this perspective, there were many years of messiness. There were all 5 stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I sat in anger the longest. I harbored it for years until I realized how it was getting in the way of my own evolution and of being a better mom and of actually creating the relationship we both desired. The denial was the unpacked suitcase. It wasn't until months later, when in a drunken haze he threw his phone and I found undeniable evidence of the depth and length of the betrayal, that I then switched gears into a cocktail of anger, bargaining, and depression for several years. It would come and go, but most of the messiness was hashed out in the first 4 months of 2012. Bouts of rage and cruelty, never-ending rumination on the details to emotionally bargain with reason, and moments of sadness as I came to terms with the fact that my experiences of the first 2 years of our relationship were a lie. The rage came out in spurts, like it usually did when one of or both of us had had too much to drink. I was really mean when I wanted to be. I learned early on to put up emotional walls and maintain a harsh exterior to protect myself. This was the first time I was confronted with a situation I didn't want to leave. Growing up with an alcoholic father, you get really good at swallowing your disappointment, betrayal, sadness, and rage deep down as you smile when you're having, as you smile when they are having a good day. So the feelings and formula were not foreign to me. When I did start taking better care of myself on my wellness journey, I was able to parse out the patterns. Anger is addictive, the rush of adrenaline, the self-righteousness, the cortisol, the drama, the victim mentality works beautifully with cycles of anger. At the same time, Jose was passing all my mean girl rage tests with mostly flying colors. It was so annoying. Like he really meant he would do anything. He really demonstrated his remorse. He also didn't completely cave. He would push back when we were really just circling the same points over and over again. Not that I didn't have a right to do so, but were we getting anywhere? Parts of what makes it possible to recover from infidelity for most people is sitting in your sense of self-righteousness. I'm the good person in this situation. That moral high ground in my case didn't exist for long because I was being so fucking mean, messy, and also methodological in my weeding out the depths of the whole story in my desperate attempt to find what felt like solid ground again. So I wasn't proud of how I handled it, but ultimately it was how we built a new foundation. We tried therapy. Am I good for time? Tell me.
Yeah, carry on. No worries. Carry on.
I think, yeah, it's one more page, I guess. I feel like I'm using a lot.
Carry on.
We tried therapy and I found it was even more infuriating. She seemed to be on his side. Looking back, I wasn't ready for her perspective, which was, do you want to rebuild the trust or not? At that point, I was still sitting in my misery and looking for validation that I was a morally superior human, because I already knew deep down that although I didn't do anything wrong in this relationship to date, I was far from perfect. I'd hurt people with selfish decisions too over the years. What if the path forward called for me to find a place of forgiveness, the forgiveness I wish I had been granted to me so many times, the forgiveness I hadn't even ever considered I needed to grant myself in order to heal and overcome these dysfunctional patterns that saved me in the dark times, but were no longer serving. Patterns that were making it impossible to find the next level of ease in this relationship or any relationship moving forward. At some point, you have to put down your suitcases of defense mechanisms and show up in the world with the compassion you wish you had encountered. Does it matter why he cheated? Culture, family tradition, disconnect to self, bruised ego from divorce, emotional immaturity to have hard conversation, a desire to feel understood by someone who spoke his language and thought all his jokes and isms were funny. Was it okay? No, absolutely not. Does it make him a bad person? Not in my book. The majority of us have made mistakes and or lied at some point, hurt people. So I leave it there. Do you want me to finish? It's almost done. Okay, wait. At the end of the day, it always comes down to doing what you want to be right, or do what you, sorry, needs work, or do what you want to be. Okay, sorry. At the end of the day, it always comes down to, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? It's a choice. You get to write your own story and decide what everything that happens to you means to you. I wanted to be happy, and deep down, I felt we could be happy. We could build a happy life together. It also meant that my definition of trust and love and the perfect relationship evolved. I remember hearing Oprah say one afternoon at 4 p.m. on her show when I was younger, trust just means that you can trust yourself to be able to handle whatever might happen. At that time, it seemed abstract to me. Now it makes perfect sense. You can make up your own rules and define terms together. We come together as an incredible team. We hold a deep compassion for each other's strengths and weaknesses and desires, and desire that we grow as individuals and as a couple. We both live life with the attitude, it's impossible, let's do it. So yeah, in reading it, it seems a little disconnected in areas, but I love your feedback or thoughts.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Who would like to go first? And it's almost 10 minutes, so well done.
Mm-hmm.
Will I go first? I think you've got very high self-awareness, and this is a bit of a, to me, it's like you writing about a thought process that you have gone through, and you're sharing it with us. So it's very it's a high level of vulnerability in it. So yeah, well done. Funnily enough, maybe on the theme of punctuation and how do we deal with it and how do we stay consistent, there were about 6 ways in which you explained to us things that were other people's words. So you had the one in double quotation marks, or right to do so was in double quotation marks. Then you had italics, years of messiness and beautifully. Then you had the single quotation marks for suitcases. And I think all of those could probably be standardized to one or the other. You choose. I don't think it really matters which one you choose. But yeah, that would be something maybe that would make it easier to create a standardized way of referring to these words that others have. And then Oprah said, trust just means, I'm wondering whether that could be better in double quotation marks because it's her words.
Or Oprah, for example. You're right. Where because she said it, Oprah said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's funny. I think people that have been in a similar situation might start thinking back of how they dealt with the situation at the time. And you were very much more forgiving than I was. that kind of got in my head. And I was like, yes. Everybody has a different way of dealing with this situation.
I took from that while you obviously forgave, you almost felt that you weren't forgiving. You was like you were beating yourself up because you were equating the way that you were behaving with the infidelity. I don't know. I mean, just personally, I wouldn't consider those two to be the same, but clearly, you did while going through this process. That came through. I wonder whether, whether it was it was almost like you wanted to forgive, but you felt that the way you were doing it wasn't actually forgiveness. That's what I took from that. I mean, it's. I'm not saying that was, I'm saying that's a positive thing. It's just that was my interpretation of it, which it's a mixed up time, right? And the mixed up nature of your emotion really came through.
Thank you. I like that reflection.
and others probably spotted this. I think right at the very beginning, I think there was the double use of and. There were two ands in the sentence. I think that was just, you probably had one more than you needed in like the very first sentence. And
Okay.
the other thing that came out, just because it was very similar, that people said to me last time I read aloud, do we need to know that Oprah's on at 4 p.m.?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for reading that, Megan. The first thing that jumped out at me was when you started distancing yourself from the pain of growing up with an alcoholic father. And how do I know this to be true? You said growing up with an alcoholic father, you get really good at swallowing your disappointment. And I think that it would be so much more powerful if you said, I got so used to swallowing my disappointment. Right? So you're sitting in the pain. You're not trying to distance yourself from it. And then you talked about at some point you have to put down your suitcases of defense mechanisms. Same comment there, right? So now you're owning it. And then you said part of what makes it possible to recover from infidelity for most people is sitting in your sense of self-righteousness. And maybe there you can actually say our sense of self-righteousness. So you're owning that attitude with the populace. And then your rationalizer comes out when you start asking the question about, does it matter why he cheated? And then you had a list. Take a look at the list and see where you can consolidate the list. Or you can maybe mention part of the list, say something in between, and then, say another part of the list. But I thought that the list was a bit long. Culture, family tradition, disconnect to self, bruised ego from divorce, emotional immaturity, to have hard conversation, a desire, you know what I mean? So it's like, you know what I mean? So I think if you broke up the list or consolidated the list, I think everyone would get that. And then I love this thing because Oprah did say it, do you want to be right or do you want to have a relationship? And when you said at the end of the day, it always comes down to, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? And I think this is where you can go also make it about you. So do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? So that's my 5 pence.
Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Megan. I could totally follow the story. What was throwing me off a little bit was throughout, there's either really short paragraphs or paragraphs that are one sentence. And in fact, what I'm looking at right now on my screen, it says, so in that is the first paragraph. It's at the bottom of that page. That's really one sentence. It looks like a paragraph, but it's one sentence. So that's what I'm talking about, the really long sentences. And then the next one below is just one sentence again. So you have a lot of things that could be combined and then things where there could be more bigger pauses in between, which made it a little bit hard for me to follow when I was reading with my eyes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Megan, that was very good. It's a frank account of you trying to go back and forth, striking a balance between logic and your feeling. And you're not trying to blame the guy. I sensed there were a little bit of feeling for the guy, but also you're trying to make sense of it, to move on, trying to reason with the unreasonable, because there are always reasons. And it's interesting because as you were reading, there were times that you slowed down, you stumbled. It's highly likely the reader would do so. And that's another reason why these read out loud are amazing. I was going to say it, but Jenny said it before me. Use shorter sentences. A combination of shorter sentences and slightly longer does make a massive difference. For example, in one of your sentences was anger is addictive, but where it was placed, it was amazing. It was great. It had great effect. And there's a bit of repetition, which can be dealt with ease. And when it comes to the visual elements, we talked, Wanda introduced us to. If we go at the top, so you're using two types of dashes. You're using the short dash, which is for creating words, and also then you're using the British dash at times, which is for separating parts of sentence. And some of the, so to emphasize something, you're using italics, and you got making a very good use of italics, but sometimes you're using to separate something, single quotation marks, sometimes double quotation marks. So it's about consistency. And I would use, for example, for operas, what she said, I'd use double quotation marks, and also have a start with uppercase. And you're trying, you're leaning more towards trying to reason with what happened, trying to distance yourself from what happened, but then you keep going back at it again and again and again. It's very raw when it comes to even the emotion. And another way that I understand this is, whenever you wrote it, you weren't thinking, you just wrote it, how it came out of you. And that tends to happen when there are long paragraphs. So a paragraph being a sentence or a long sentence. To give you an idea, the easiest sentence length for the reader's brain to take in is between 8 and 16 words. Now, I'm not saying let's write all of those without length, but it's easier for the brain to pick up. From the moment it goes past 21, it becomes quite, so it makes a massive difference. If you have a list of items, such as when you were talking about feelings, so then split them. Or you can full stop, or maybe this, that, and the other, or this, that, and the other, and a question mark. Very, very good. Well done. I'd love to read more, to hear more what happens next.
And if I can come back in briefly, if that's okay. What I'm hearing you say without you saying it, and maybe you say it later on, is, why wasn't I worthy? Why wasn't I good enough for my daddy to be normal, or my daddy to not, you know what I mean? And then why, and looking for validation inside relationships, and that sense of worthiness, because if I was worthy, then he wouldn't cheat on me. And I think that's something that's so powerful. And I think that's something that many people go through, male and female. Why, that looking for happiness inside relationship, and that perfection and that fantasy that we have about the perfect relationship. And I think it's important to call that out.
I think Megan likes the male gender. She's fascinated by the male gender and wants to see the best in the male gender. So that's another thing I saw, underlying message as well, without you even realizing it. I might be mistaken, but that's what I felt. Great. Next one. Who's next?
Me?
Great.
Yeah, sure.
Ready, steady, go.
Can you see this?
If you could make the window slightly bigger, then yeah, better.
How about that? All right, here we are. So this is the introduction to my book. Well,
Maybe make, sorry, Wanda, maybe make the font size one that's better.
yeah. Can see it okay? Okay. Grab your window of opportunity while it's still there. This book is going to redefine your idea of career success. You've probably been told that working hard is the key to making it, right? But let's be real. That path often leads to burnout, stress, and feeling completely disengaged. What if there is a better way? One where you're not just working hard, but doing your life's work. A kind of work that fills you with purpose and meaning, so it never feels like a grind. That's what focusing on legacy can do for you. And trust me, when you're living your life's work, you will never look at your job the same way again. In this book, I will talk you through a step-by-step process to help you discover your life's work. Together, we will increase your contribution and personal fulfillment. But to do that, you've got to be willing to try something different. Chances are you've already been thinking about working in a better way for some time. Maybe unhappy with where things are headed, and you feel like change is long overdue. Perhaps you've just been let go from a job and it feels like the perfect time to pursue something that aligns with your values. What do you have to lose? What kind of company, career, or industry suits you best? Or maybe a health scare or a tough conversation at home made it clear that you can't keep pushing yourself as hard as you have been. This is your moment to find balance. So how will you do that? Maybe the kids are grown and money is no longer the main factor in your career choices. What would you do if money wasn't the biggest driver? You might even be so disillusioned with your current job that you're ready to walk away, dreaming of opening that cozy coffee shop, art gallery, or even an animal shelter. Now is the time to take the leap. What's next for you? Maybe you've just celebrated a milestone birthday and it hit you. Do you really want to spend the next decade doing the same thing? Here's the good news. You are not lost. You're exactly where you need to be. Everything that's happened up to now has been building towards this next move. This is your window of opportunity, and I'm urging you to grab it while it's still open. This book shares real-life stories of people who seized their window of opportunity and completely transformed their lives. They took control, found more joy, success, and freedom along the way. These are people I've worked with through my coaching. Together, we created a new way of living that was filled with purpose and meaning. So how did I get here? There was a pivotal moment in my life that gave me my own window of opportunity. In the summer of 2015, I had a heart attack. I almost didn't make it. I was 50 years old, and death was staring me in the face. I wasn't prepared for it. The questions started flooding in. Had I lived with purpose? What was I leaving behind? My mind was all over the place and I felt completely lost. But then I did what I always do. I made a plan. At the time, I was working for an IT company, negotiating huge software deals and teaching negotiation skills. I'd spent 25 years in procurement and commercial roles and had become skilled in negotiating. But then I realized something. I needed to start negotiating a win-win deal for myself. One thing on my bucket list was to finally use my psychology degree and passion for coaching. So I got back to a 4-day work week and started my coaching certification. Fast forward, I'm now a qualified mindset coach with my own practice. My clients come to me when they're seeking something: balance, progress, happiness, or a fresh start. Problem is, they often don't have a clear plan. They're afraid of looking back and feeling regret. They don't want to live life hoping for the best and wandering aimlessly anymore. They want real answers to the big questions. Who am I? Where am I going? How will I get there? And what is my legacy? I had those same questions back in 2015. Over the years, I developed my No Regrets coaching plan. And that is what this book is all about. It's designed to help you find those answers and live with purpose. So let me explain the steps of the No Regrets coaching plan. Part 1. Who am I? What is your trigger and window of opportunity? In my procurement days, every contract renewal had a trigger point that led us to renegotiate the deal. For large deals, we would prepare ourselves 6 months in advance if the contract had a planned renewal date. A couple of times we'd fallen out of love with the product or supplier and we wanted out. These triggers gave us an opportunity to improve our lot. If we were not prepared, we could end up rolling over with the existing contract terms. There would be no opportunity to come to the table and negotiate a better deal. We would keep going as we were. In your life, what's the trigger that's brought you here? Is something ending? Have you fallen out of love with what you're doing or experienced a fallout? How can you best prepare to create a better deal for yourself? How long do you have? What will happen if you miss this window of opportunity? What is your starting point? In my contract negotiations, the first thing I did was to find a copy of the signed contract and any subsequent documents. These documents set out the rules of the purchase we'd made. I then made a list of the important clauses. Every contract I reviewed had its strong points. In the new contract, I wanted to keep those strong points and protect them. Just like I reviewed contracts, I want you to review your life. What are the rules you live by? What are your core values? What's important to you? And what do you stand for? What do you own? When reviewing a contract, I always looked at what we already owned. It was the foundation for our future needs. In your life, what are your passions and skills? What makes you happy? What are your unique strengths? These will be the foundation for your purpose and meaning. Part 2. Where am I going? What is your desired outcome? In negotiations, we spent months talking to stakeholders to define what success looked like. We needed to work out our budget, and we needed to renew, what we needed to renew, what upgrades we wanted, and what could be let go of. We wanted an optimized contract. What does success look like for you? How can you use your core values, passions, and skills to serve others? What do you need to let go of? What would be the optimum outcome? So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, that should be fine. Thank you. Who would want to go first?
I'll go. Wanda, the way you write is very calming. I feel calm when you're reading to me in the way what you're reading to me, which is great, especially because you're talking about burnout and stress. And I think that's really helpful for those people who are in that state. A few things that I would consider is there's a paragraph that starts with "Who am I?" And I don't know where it is, but it starts with "Who am I?" So there's some, and in general, I'll talk about this in general, it's kind of like Megan's. There's a lot of short paragraphs, And when I started writing personally, I was writing social media posts and things like that, emails, and I had to keep everything short. And there were a lot of one sentences or there, and there's a flow to that when you're looking at something on a tiny little screen. But when I'm reading a book, I want to read like seeing little short pieces doesn't feel right to me. And I don't know if anyone else has that other feeling, but when paragraphs are too short or those sentences are too many on their own, it doesn't feel like a book to me.
Okay.
There's a few places of that, and that who am I paragraph is one of them. It could go with the paragraph above it. It's not that, it's the actual paragraph that starts with who am I.
Okay. All right. I'll have to find it.
Okay, and then I think there's a bunch of questions, and then it can go, but it could go back up with the one prior to it. And then something threw me off when you started going into the parts of the book. And I realized that when you were going into that much detail of the book in the intro, I didn't feel like I needed to read the book anymore because I just had all the answers right there.
Yes, good point.
It's all good information. The writing's great. It just didn't feel like it should go in the intro to me.
Okay.
That's all I have.
And
Thank
I
you.
agree.
Go for
I
it.
agree. I agree with Jenny. Yeah, too much information in the intro. When you started talking about your why, you started talking about your heart attack, that felt like that should be the opener, like boom, that, you know, this happened to me. This is why I'm doing this. And I want to live a life with no regrets, and I would like to offer these services to others. There were a couple of instances where it was a little repetitive in terms of the values, or maybe it's because you're reading the intro and you're reading the beginning of the book. Yeah, so don't give too much away in the beginning. And there was also a part of it that felt like you were fishing. Like, you know, I'm a you know, traveling salesperson, and I have this gadget, this gadget, this gadget, that gadget. And it felt very gadgety to me. And I know as coaches, you know, they tell us that we should pick a niche. And it sounds like your niche is living a life with no regrets. So however you want to package that or reword that. You know, yeah. Say just enough, but don't say too much. That's my suggestion.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
A couple of things, if I may. I mean, I find it fascinating. And it's a little bit closer to my world than what we've been through before. There was a bit on the very first page when you talk about your will work on your contribution and your you go to the very first page. Together will increase your contribution and personal fulfillment. I didn't understand what increase your contribution meant. It felt, because a couple of paragraphs earlier, it says you're not, you know, you're working too hard, but you know what you're doing. And then it says, well, increase your contribution. To me, increase your contribution makes it sound like you're going to work harder. So, I mean, that may be just my interpretation. The second thing was towards the end of the bit when we got, which I think, without putting words in her mouth, I may be picking up on what Weedy was saying about fishing. I don't know that I know that when you negotiate, one of the most important things of a negotiation is to find common ground, which means you have to pursue values. But I think when you go through the fine details of a contract, that is different. That is almost like legal nitpicking. And to me, that comparison with asking yourself about your values, it doesn't work. It might work with the principle of negotiation, but I wasn't sure that asking people what they're to consider what their values are is the same as asking someone to go through a legal contract in detail. I appreciate that sounds kind of harsh because
Oh, no, it's a good
quite
spot.
a big, there's quite a lot of a big section working on there. But I wonder if it might work better with negotiation. But I'm definitely with the other two, which is that will probably need more explanation and therefore should be in a separate chapter.
Thank you.
It's interesting because when we were going through this with Wanda and Marco, another Publishing Mastery member, and we did almost say the same. It could be split in two chapters, the introduction. And I'm not sure you need that first line at all, because the second paragraph does the job pretty well.
Yeah.
And you don't even need write. Key to making it, but let's be real. And then you say, in this book, I will walk you through, but you're walking me through. So do you need in this book? I will walk you through. It's more personal. And there's a part where the person asks the question, do you really, why not say, do I really want to be doing whatever I've been doing? And it's when you start to talk about your heart attack, my mind kept going after you were reading further down to the sentence. You said, I wasn't prepared. I'm not sure. Did you mean to say it scared the hell out of you? Because nothing prepares anyone for this.
Mm, mm, mm.
It's almost you trying to reason with it. So I felt it scared the hell out of me. The living daylights out of me. Yeah, and I did like the fact you had the way you had those 4 questions in italics, and in the fourth one, before the fourth one, you had an and. You don't need the and at all, because the italics do the job.
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't need it because that's the italics are already making, so you already have a list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been toying, nowhere in the book do I talk about negotiations or contracts or anything. This is the only place where I mention it, whether it's needed.
Why don't you write it first and then
Yeah, yeah.
decide?
Well, so that's what I was saying to you yesterday. Like, can this be super short or much shorter and take all the things to do with negotiations out? Because it's never going to be mentioned again.
Yeah, so is the reader ready at this point is the reader's brain indoctrinated to the point they can handle that part? That's where it comes down to. Like with any story, fiction, non-fiction, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Wanda, that paragraph you were just on with all the 4 questions, that's the paragraph I was talking about. It could go with the paragraph above it.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I was just going to suggest that you introduce the heart attack maybe for earlier. It's like a point to draw the reader in. even the first line or something like, because that was for me the point where it was like, oh, okay, like she really did hit. It's not just, it was like a very clear wall.
Yeah, and my change of career, and now I'm helping other people to change careers or look at work in a different way, right? If I hadn't had the art attack, none of this would have happened.
So almost like, let me save you from having a heart attack, or I don't know. That's kind of one reflection, and I agree with the bit about contracts.
Pretty
It
good,
kind of
actually.
didn't connect for me. Maybe even talking more about just making decisions. And I agree, it's kind of long, and I would like be more of teasers that are given as to the different parts of the book.
Yeah, fabulous.
How important it is to the reader? Is it to the reader that it was 2015? It could be
So you have that date twice.
3 years ago, because you're saying I was 50. It's a landmark, and 3 years ago, not long ago, 2 summers ago.
And do I need to say I was 50? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's important because it's a landmark, and yeah, but in the summer of 2015.
Yeah, it's relatively young to have a heart attack, so that's definitely the point.
Yeah.
Should be in there. I think by putting it at the front, it really showed as well, because you mentioned legacy on 2 or 3 occasions. I think there's a direct connection with the heart attack and worrying about legacy, because legacy is something that comes after death.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I actually challenge. That's one of the ideas that I plant, that it's got nothing to do with death. I mean, sorry, legacy doesn't necessarily have anything to do with death.
Okay.
It can create legacy in your lifetime.
Can I
Yes.
make just one last suggestion that maybe you can toy with? So I thought you could, that sentence in the summer of 2015, like that's the first sentence. And then maybe there's some other thing that ties in this no regrets.
Yeah.
Like, had I passed, I would have gone with so many regrets or something. To really kind of like,
Yeah.
And
because
that
niche is really powerful.
I'm feeling that sentence was, I was 50 years old and death was staring me in the face, could be the first sentence. It really pulls you in, that sentence, but then you have to tie it into, was your heart attack really from burnout, or was it from health? Or, I mean,
Yeah, that's the problem. It was actually health related rather than burnout, but it was a start of a journey.
I think it was
if you
still
can
the
explain
power
that somehow in the first paragraph, that it was, because I do like the questions in the next paragraph there. They kind of tie it together with what the book is about.
I'm building on what Megan said about how to use it. Do you really need that sentence? But then I did what I always do. I made a plan. Why don't you go straight at the time? I was working for the IT company, an IT company. Because you dealt with, it's about increasing that drama.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very good.
So many good bits of feedback on me right now. But anyway, that's what this is about, right?
Yeah. Great. Okay, so we have come to the end of the workshop. Today, I would like to thank Wanda for the great simple, clear, to the point presentation and all the feedback. What would you like to cover in the next workshop? We can carry on this. We do it. And Jenny, will you be able to be here in 2 weeks?
I think so.
Do you want to prepare a presentation?
I would, but I don't have the time.
Okay, fair enough. We'll leave it.
I'm wondering though if we could do something on book covers.
Okay, that's fine. Let me make a note. So I'll prepare something on book covers. Yeah, very important. It's where almost every author gets so emotional and they think they start to see the book coming together. It's a sales copy. That's what it is. Great, book covers. I'll prepare a presentation. Great. And I'll say thank you to everyone. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I will see you in 2 weeks. I'll see some of you before 2 weeks as well. And Megan, thank you for your read out loud and for your feedback. It's very good
Thanks for having me.
because we had it before. Great.
Well,
Enjoy the rest of Saturday. Take care. Well done.
Bye.
I'll post the recording on Monday with a short summary as well. Yeah. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.